Hi, this is the Average Human Being podcast, a podcast about noticing the small moments that shape us more than the big ones. I'm Darren Mell, Average Human Being. I'm not here to teach you anything, just talk about being human. Thanks for listening. Hey, how you doing? It's Darren. I'm an average human being, and thanks for listening. Welcome to the first podcast of the Average Human Being. And this is new for me, but I thought I'd give it a shot. For those of you that don't know me, I am a 57-year-old Gen Xer who over time has realized that he's average. Yeah, our parents told us different and said that we could be president and do all these great things. But what I've learned over time that the best moments in life are the ones that you never saw coming. And as a father of two wonderful children, married to the same woman for the past 29 years, leader, hair metal fan, guitar player, lover of birds, a good glass of wine, and the ordinary, who's always been in the world of the middle, from middle class, the middle seat, and middle management. One thing that I've learned, and what time does that I felt, is it softens the edges and intensifies the meaning. So last year in 2025 was an epiphany year for me. 35 years of working, 20 as a people leader, 28 years of marriage, kids grown and pretty much out on their own. I realized that at some point in life, you realize what you're good at. And it isn't a conceited or a cocky thing, but more, what do you have of value that you can help others with? And for me, I've written several books on leadership. I've written books on, one of my books is called The Middle Seat Memoirs, and I'm a self-published author, and I'm not here to sell millions of books. I write to see if people agree and understand maybe sort of the lens that I'm coming from as an aging Gen Xer. And I thought I'd create a podcast for the rest of us out there that understand that average really is the superpower, because average means that you can connect, I think, with more people. And, I thought about this in some of my writing, and I wanted to share with the rest of you. So this is going to be a podcast where sometimes I talk about leadership, the quirkiness of corporate America, the things that we think in our head as we're raising our children and interact. I may read a section from one of my books and want to hear what you all have to think about it. But I find that most of my moments in life, when you're going through them, they may not be as funny, but looking back on them, they're funny as hell. So my inspiration really comes from a lifetime of conversations as a father, a husband, friend, leader, where I discovered that the best moments of connection, a lot of times they happen when you least expect them, and usually with someone that you might have once called other. I've seen firsthand, both in my professional life and personal life, how it is easy to let differences define us, but also how powerful it is when we choose to focus on what unites us instead. So for me, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in the 70s and 80s. I was very fortunate. I've always said that my upbringing was like the old sitcom, The Brady Bunch. And don't even get me started on that, because my trivia, I will crush anyone in Brady Bunch trivia, and I say, bring it on if you think you're worthy. But that show, if for those of you that don't know, it was a family of 6 kids growing up together that came from a merger of 2 families. And each episode was 30 minutes, and there was a problem, and it was always solved by the end of the episode. But it was never anything that was really that bad. None of the kids had a teen pregnancy or a drug addiction. Most of the time it was someone broke mom's vase and tried to hide it, or they put itching powder in the boys' sleeping bags at a neighborhood sleepover event. And I always say that that was my life. Easy, breezy, and a little bit cheesy. But what I realized then as I grew up and got out on my own, that life wasn't a sitcom. And I'm sure you know that. Plus my lack of understanding and naivety to like what was to come after college was a wave that was so tall I couldn't really see on top of it. And the wave really was called reality. And for me growing up, for many of us, in our late 50s, MTV was the soundtrack of my life growing up. Once it came on in the air and we got cable television in 1980, my life was never the same. At least while they still played music videos, for those of you that can remember when MTV actually did that. And then for me, Midwestern 70s, 80s, 90s, movies like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Roadhouse, the original one with Patrick Swayze. They were my go-to movies for escape for entertainment. And that was a long time ago. But now at the age of 57, I've grown nostalgic over time and realized that it's the individual moments in life that you recognize that really puts you in a state where you can actually experience gratitude. And I've come to understand that that is probably one of the greatest feelings that you can have. That moment of gratitude where or somebody that you're with, you're in the middle of a moment that is life defining, that will probably stick with you and pop up for the rest of your life. And that's where the whole average human being came about. I title it in my books. One of the books that I wrote was called C-Level Leadership, and that's SEA level leadership, because I decided at one point, like, what is my leadership plan? When you interview for jobs for leadership, they always ask you, what is your leadership style and plan? So I wrote a book about it. And the book is C-Level Leadership, putting people at the center of your inspirational, empathetic, and successful leadership plan. And that's what it's about. People, whether you're a leader, whether you're a human, whether you're a parent, leadership and who you are as a person is really what matters. And, so as time rolls on for me, and for those of you who are not there, when you get into your 30s and 40s and 50s, you should have a pretty good idea of what you're good at. And for me, it turns out that repetition really was the mother of the skill, especially when it comes to reading people. When you are a people leader like myself, your number one job out there is hiring. So what do you do to hire? You interview tremendous numbers of people. And so after more than 20 years as a people leader, interviewing and hiring more people than I can count, my talent really is sizing up personalities. And I'm not talking about like some sort of Jedi mind trick or a sixth sense for sniffing out who's going to steal your lunch from the break room or anything like that. I mean, like the everyday kind of boots on the ground stuff, picking up on mannerisms, reading character, and most importantly, figuring out who's trustworthy and who's just really good at talking about their, in the corporate world, their passion for synergy. One of those buzz terms that sound important, but nobody really understands what it means. And so over the years for me, I've gotten what I think is pretty good at spotting the difference between genuine connection and someone just putting on a show. You start to notice things over time, like how little someone makes eye contact, or whether they actually listen, or even if they're humble enough to admit that they don't know everything, and if they're just waiting for their turn to talk. So interview after interview, team meeting after team meeting, you start to develop a radar for the big stuff. Narcissism, empathy, authenticity. And trust me, you can spot narcissism faster than you can say corporate retreat. And you learn quickly that empathy is worth its weight in gold. And I know empathy is a bit of a four-letter word. I'm not here to talk politics on either side. I may talk some politics, but I will talk of it more from the leadership angle, that I believe that we need to get better. We, the people, need to get better at who we interview and hire for our political jobs. And we'll leave it at that. But, I feel that authenticity is the holy grail. In a world where so many people are trying to be what they think you want, finding someone who's comfortable, just being themselves is the equivalent of finding a parking spot at the mall on Christmas Eve. What's for me is what is really wild is how all these interactions have helped me grow, not just as a leader, but as a human being. Every conversation, every handshake or awkward Zoom wave, every gut feeling about a candidate has taught me something about people and about myself that I've learned that the ability to connect with others, to really see them, is a skill that gets sharper with practice. And the more you practice, the more you realize how much we all have in common beneath the surface. So, I say this, I will never say I'm not the greatest person on the planet. It took me well into my 40s to realize that the only way I'm going to improve who I am is to put some effort into that. I had a coworker a few years back said, work on yourself more than you work on your job, and that will take care of your job. And that stuck with me. And, I thank my wife of 28, almost 29 years now, in helping me towards that pathway. Our habits are formed so solid in our younger years that it takes a lot of effort to real change. And I realize that. But I've learned that a very empowering feeling to work on yourself. It feels good and it helps you build confidence as well. So looking back on all this, I can honestly say that being exposed to so many personalities, good, bad, and everything in between, it's made me more patient, more open-minded, and a lot more curious about what does make people tick. And it's also made me fiercely protective of authenticity, both in myself and others. Because at the end of the day, the best moments in life and at work come from real connections, not rehearsed performances. So if you're still searching for what's good as the years go by, start paying attention to the people around you. You might be surprised what you learn, not just about them, but about yourself. And if you're lucky, you'll pick up a few stories and some laughs along the way. And my hope through this Average Human Being podcast is to hear from you all of moments and experiences that you've had. I will be quoting different things. One of the books that I wrote is called The Middle Seat Memoirs, and it's 34, 35 chapters of moments in corporate America, in life and raising children and being married, as well as airline travel. And there's so many moments in there where in our heads we're thinking things, but we don't talk about them. In that book, I took those moments in my head and that I know that people can relate to. And we'll dig into some of that because some of those moments are hilarious. We just don't stop long enough to appreciate them. And so I ask you, fellow average human being, to join me on a quest to talk about the average things that make us laugh in those moments, because I honestly believe that it's the moments that matter the most between all of us. And for my first ever podcast, not a bad place to start. I'd like to hear from you. I will continue to do this once a week, put a story out there. Want to hear from you, from one Gen Xer to the other, but I don't care what generation you're from. If you understand that people are really what make the world go around, and those average moments are really what define us and builds our character and reveals it, then I'd love to have you join me. My name is Darren Mellon, average human being. And that's what I've been thinking about this week. Talk to you next time. Thanks. This has been the Average Human Being podcast with Darren Mellon. Thanks for listening.